A huge focus for me this week has been productivity and prioritization and identifying the specific tasks and actions that we need to complete to enable us to make consistent, regular progress towards our goals. Taking on this daily podcast, balancing this with my existing coaching business, family commitments, and everything else that I have on at the moment has been of particular importance to me. The last thing I wanted to do was take on a new adventure like this and have my existing business suffer as a consequence. All my family commitments take a hit for that matter. So this whole week has been about time management, prioritization, and how we can identify those next steps that are going to really help us move the needle towards what it is we're ultimately trying to move towards, all while maintaining a sense of balance and trying as much as we can to enjoy the journey along the way. Hello there, Paul Heron here, and welcome to the From Zero to Marketing Hero podcast. This podcast is my year-long challenge to myself to record, upload, post a podcast episode every single day for 12 months in the hope that I can finally get my head around and master some of the strategies or some of the marketing strategies required to enable my ideal perfect client to find out who I am and have them attracted into my business in ethical ways in line with my values. So as I said, this last few days has turned into a bit of a productivity series in some ways. It started off by me not intending to think about productivity again, but on Sunday, I spoke to how I organize my day and how I use Google Calendar, I color code, I make sure that the most important tasks are done as close to the start of the day as possible, all with the goal of having successful days. And for me, that's really important. Being a visual type person, being able to see in my calendar everything that I've got on, everything that's important, ensuring that there's enough space in between in case my day takes a detour that wasn't expected. And the more I go through this process of planning my day, following through and giving it my best shot in terms of taking the necessary actions and the reflective piece at the end, the better I get at planning and executing and being able to identify or being able to estimate, I guess is probably a better word, but being able to estimate what I think I can get done, what I've got the capacity to get done. And as I say, the more I go through this, the better my planning becomes in general. And that took me through to Monday, where I decided to expand on this a little bit further. And while daily planning is such a critical element and something that I completely recommend everyone do, when we've only got our ultimate goal, like for me, it's a goal 12 months down the track, and we're trying to determine what our daily action should be, sometimes there's just too much of a gap in between those 2 points, and it can be really difficult to determine. So I spoke about a technique that I have employed over the last month and for quite some time, actually, and that is to set myself some weekly goals. And the power of this is that it gives you that same ability to go through the process of planning, taking action and reflecting, but on a slightly larger scale. When we plan over the course of a week, it gives us enough time to be able to think through a decent next step, or, I like to think of them as a mini project or a part of a project or at least a large enough chunk of work that's going to require a little bit of thought and a little bit of trial and error and a little bit of figuring stuff out as you go through the course of the week. And I've found this hugely beneficial. If we do this every single week over the course of a year, we have 52 opportunities to, again, improve our planning process and improve the process of estimating what we're capable of, thinking big. There are so many benefits that can come from applying something similar to this. And then I spoke about a prioritization technique called the 4Ds. And this process is basically to evaluate anything that has the potential to take our time or attention, or we're considering tackling, and evaluate it against 4 measures. So we can either look at doing something straight away, getting it off our list altogether, taking an action, which means it's completely finished. So do the task. Often this is reserved for very short tasks, if it's going to take less than 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever rules we set up to this. But if we've got the capacity to do it straight away, just get it done straight away. The second D is to delegate. This is mainly reserved for low priority, low importance tasks that we don't necessarily have to use our own expertise to implement. But we can potentially have others help us out. And There are many different tasks that fall into this category. A lot of the repetitive tasks, I guess, we can eventually build systems we can outsource, but we can use this to evaluate anything that we're considering. And I guess the question is, do we need to be doing this particular thing ourselves? The third D is the power of deferring. And the question is, do I need to be doing this right now? So if something isn't critically important that it requires your time and attention right now, it may be beneficial to defer it to a future date that makes sense, that enables us to not think about this particular thing until the required time, which in turn enables us to focus on the things that we are allocating our time and attention to today. Now, this does require us to have systems in place that we trust. I spoke for myself about using my Google Calendar, and I've got a few other methods that I use to make sure that I am reminded of the things that I need to be doing at the time that I choose. And again, the power of this is to ensure that we're only focusing our time and attention on the things that are immediately of a need for us to focus on. And we're enabling everything else to be out of our mind. We're trying to develop a clear mind in terms of in terms of this stuff. I kind of like to think of it as decluttering our mind in some ways and allowing us to really pay attention to the things we're choosing to pay attention to in the moment. And the fourth D is to delete. Delete anything that isn't crucially important in terms of taking us towards our goal. There are so many things that are within our scope of possibility that we could be spending our time completing, but there are relatively few things that are going to actually move the needle and help us make progress towards what is most important to us. So again, very much in line with clearing our mind and clearing our path. Anything that's not vitally important towards the progress we're trying to make, delete as much of that as we can. So it's all this productivity stuff that has been on my mind all this week. And it continues to be in many ways. For me, taking on this project has created much more work that I could be doing. There are so many little rabbit holes that I would love to take the time to dive into, but I know that's at the expense of the things that are truly important for me right now. So today, I just wanted to quickly show a live example or show how I have applied this stuff to my schedule this week. And hopefully that will highlight how thinking about this all this week has really benefited me in terms of gaining clarity on what's most important to me right now. So how have I applied this to my scheduling and prioritization this week? So there are two things that take equal importance in terms of priority. They are my one-on-one coaching calls. They're in my calendar. They're the things that are non-negotiable, I can't miss. And my family commitments. Anything that comes into my calendar as a family commitment, again, is a non-negotiable. The reason I've gone down this path of becoming self-employed and doing what I do is to have that freedom and flexibility to be able to do the things that I want to do with my family. Things like their matches and training sessions and family time together. If it makes it into my calendar, it becomes a non-negotiable. I'll be there to do it. Then I guess there's this podcast. I have committed myself to this challenge of showing up, thinking about marketing at least once every day, and creating a podcast to document this journey and hopefully improve my skills along the way. So at the moment, that's a 1 hour entry in the calendar every single day. My goal at the moment, at least, may change in the future, is to go from idea through to filming, through to editing and posting in an hour every day. And that boundary is really important. For me to be able to fit everything in, it's important that I can practice sticking to these time-bound constraints. So that's a lot in the calendar already. That's a big chunk of my week is taken up with these things that are longer-term commitments that I have made to myself and to my family. But how do I ensure that the little weekly projects that I've set myself are actioned and I do continue to make progress on these things that I've determined are most important? Now, if you've been following along, you'll remember that last week I picked out 3 separate goals that I would like to work on this week. One was to start a process of starting more conversations, to put a system in place that I can turn up and reach out and do some of this prospecting work that I've identified is really important in this marketing process. Another was to review the Bark touch points that I have, my profile, the way that I'm reaching out, all the individual touch points. And a third was to think about the data that I want to be collecting in terms of this marketing progress that I'm trying to make. I've spoken a few times over the last month about this continuous improvement methodology. And a big part of that is being able to identify what has actually been happening, what are the results that I have actually achieved. And I've identified that there's a couple of questions I just don't know the answers to. Things like how many visitors are looking at my website on a daily, weekly basis. I just don't know. Things like the outbound contact attempts that I've made. In the past, if you asked me how many I had attempted or completed and what the results of that were, I have no idea. So this week, what I did was have a think through how much time I've got available to allocate to these projects. And what I came up with is that on most days, particularly the days where I've only got 2 phone calls booked in my calendar, I have the capacity to put 2 1-hour blocks into my calendar each day. And this is important. As I mentioned earlier in the week, it's important for me to have some space in between everything I do, just in case I get knocked off track. It's important to know which of the tasks in my calendar are highest priority and where the non-negotiables are. But it's also really important to start this habit or start developing a habit of identifying the blocks of time that I'm going to start making progress on these projects. So for this week, what I determined was, or what I worked out was, the conversations and the reaching out is something that's vitally important. I've grouped into that posting on social media, and there's a couple of other things that were important to me. And I've put an hour block in my calendar every single workday this week. I'm going to try a couple of different things. Some mornings I've got coaching calls in the morning, so I can't put this in there first thing in the morning. So in those days, I've popped it into the afternoon. On the other days, I'll putting it into the morning. And this week is really going to be about just testing a few things and seeing what works. So there's an hour worth of prospecting in every day. And every day I've also put an hour to work on the other projects. And I've spread that through the course of the week. So that effectively becomes my plan for the week. My calendar is laid out. The plan of what I intend to do, my intentions are clear on the calendar. I've got it set up. It's all color-coded. It makes sense to me. I really like looking at it, and we'll see how it goes. So I will come back next week. I will evaluate how I went against that plan. Was I being too ambitious? Was I trying to put too many things into the calendar? Or did it feel like there wasn't enough and maybe I could put a little bit more in there? I won't know. I can't know until I turn up next week after I've had the chance to go through this plan and see what works. And the last thing I quickly want to note is that sitting behind all this is developing and bringing a healthy mindset to this planning process. It's not about being perfect, but it is about creating a little bit of structure that's going to give me the best chance of getting these things done. If I look at my plan, I don't need to be spending hour after hour ensuring these projects are completed through to fruition. My plan will be a success if most of these hour-long blocks I've spent some time thinking about that particular problem. And if I'm able to record any progress throughout the course of the week, it's going to be a huge win. So it really is, more than anything else, I think, about developing this healthy mindset towards approaching goal setting, committing myself to taking the applicable actions in accordance with the plan, and the healthy reflective piece afterwards to continue learning, growing, continue believing that I've got what it takes to get to the end of this project and have the results that I'm looking for. So I'll have to see how I wake up and how I feel tomorrow, but I think this is going to be the end of the productivity week. But I was having a thought this morning, there is so much information that I have in terms of tips and tricks and strategies to optimize your productivity and give yourself the best chance possible of developing your own recipe for success, trusting yourself with taking the actions that you know you need to be taking to make progress towards your goals. And what I want to offer is an opportunity to download a lot more information in relation to processes, systems, productivity in general. So I'm going to create a simple landing page. If you're interested, you can click on the link below and I will email you through a copy of the document that I've put together. There really is a wealth of information there and it covers everything from goal setting, the relationship to failure and goal setting, challenging ourselves to step out of our comfort zone and just showing up and taking the actions that we need to take and working through how we prioritize that. I know this is something that I'm not alone in feeling a little bit of overwhelm, and I'm sure it's something that can be hugely beneficial for a lot of you guys out there. So If it sounds interesting, click the link below and I'll send you out a copy and you can let me know what you think. So that's it for today. I hope you've got some value from this exercise. If you haven't listened to the previous few days, I'd recommend going back and having a listen. And as always, just a quick reminder, if you are getting value from this series, please consider subscribing and or sharing with anyone else that you know may get the same value. One of my goals is to share this content with as many people as I possibly can and have people get involved in the conversation. The best way to do that is to head over to my website. It's paulheron.com. There is a link below, but come on over. There's a ton of information. There's a link to a Facebook group, which is the perfect place to start these conversations. There's links to all the podcast episodes. If you think you can provide value on the show as a guest, there's a link there to start the process of getting involved. And you can also contact me directly there with anything that you might want to say, add, contribute. I'd love to hear from you. So I hope you all have a fantastic day. Until tomorrow, bye for now.